everyone, and welcome to our talk today. I just saw that Renée Cummings was able to join us just now. So welcome, Renée. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. Our discussion today will be a Q&A with data ethics in mind, and we'll hear a little bit about Renée Cummings' journey into this space. And then I have some questions prepared, but I'm also going to pause along the way for anyone who would like to ask questions. I've been told that you guys can unmute yourself. So when I pause, feel free to unmute yourself and say your question then. And we also have the chat feature, so you can also put your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to everyone within this hour. I'm Melissa Phillips. I'm a data scientist at GA-CCRi, which is a local company here in Charlottesville. I used to be a teacher and transitioned into this about a year and a half ago. I did the program, the MSDS program at UVA. And so it's been a nice change for me. And one of the emphases at UVA was data ethics. And so as I joined my company, I wanted to keep those topics in the forefront of my mind. And the year after I graduated, Renée Cummings joined UVA as a data activist in residence there. And so I saw that and got really excited. And so I was able to ask her to do some talks, and this is one of them that she agreed to. So I'm really excited about this, and thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'll begin with reading Renée's bio. I think you'll find it really inspiring, and then we'll start there with some
We're now paired. Enjoy.
I think someone needs to unmute or needs to mute. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here we go. Renée Cummings is an AI ethicist and the first data activist in residence at the School of Data Science at the University of Virginia. She's also a criminologist, criminal psychologist, therapeutic jurisprudence specialist, and a community scholar at Columbia University. Advocating for AI we can trust, that is accountable, transparent, explainable, responsible, and principled, as well as more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, Renée is on the front line of ethical AI, generating real-time solutions to many of the consequences of AI and the impacts of data on society. Renée specializes in AI leadership, AI policy development, AI governance, AI risk management, AI crisis communication, building ethical AI, and using AI to save lives. She is committed to using AI to empower and transform by helping governments and organizations navigate the AI landscape and develop future AI leaders. Renée is on the board of advisors of the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. She's a founding board member of the Springer Journal AI Ethics. She's also on the board of Women in Voice, as well as on the board of Inspired Minds, producers of the World Summit AI. Renée lectures extensively on AI and data ethics and contributed significantly to the creation of the first ethical emerging technologist certification. A thought leader, motivational speaker, and mentor, Renée has mastered the art of creative storytelling, science communication, and deconstructing complex topics into critical everyday conversations that inform and inspire. So thank you so much, Renée, and welcome today.
Thank you so much for including me in the conversation. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Thank you. So we can start with my first question here. Your background is in criminology and the legal system, and yet now you find yourself in the space of data ethics. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, how you made that transition, and even maybe how you started your career? Just you could tell us kind of that whole pipeline there.
Sure. Thank you so much, Melissa. So I think my transition into data science and AI, of course, is because of my work in criminal justice, and we can all appreciate that data is about decision making. And a lot of decision making happens in the criminal justice system in real time that requires data. So we were building these algorithmic decision making systems using historical data, and we all know some of the challenges with historical data. And what we were creating were these zombie predictions, or these overestimations of risks when it came to defendants of color, and these algorithmic decision-making systems were behaving badly or creating some very unique challenges for the criminal justice system. So I guess it was my commitment, even as a criminologist and criminal psychologist, to concepts such as justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, had me thinking more critically and questioning the use of algorithmic decision-making systems, and saying that if we wanted something to be fair, then we had to ensure that we were really thinking or reimagining the ways in which we were using data. So it is my commitment to justice. It is my commitment also to due process and procedural justice that sort of woke me up to the fact that these algorithms were not really providing the kind of decision-making, rigorous decision-making that was required. So initially, I just started speaking more and more about the challenges of AI in the criminal justice system, and of course, ways in which we can do it right, ways in which we could ensure that we use this technology in a way that's equitable, ways in which we could ensure that it's inclusive innovation that's really inspiring criminal justice decision-making, and ways in which we could think about using AI for criminal justice reform. So that was the platform on which I pretty much launched an international speaking career on artificial intelligence, data activism, and AI ethics. So it was all committed to justice.
Thank you so much for that. And then you have this position as a data activist in residence at UVA School of Data Science. Can you tell us a bit more about that position and what it means for you?
Sure, thank you. So it's been a very exciting time at UVA. Also spending more time in Charlottesville because I've spent most of my life in New York City. And the position really offered me the opportunity to work on a project that I was always thinking about. And this project looks at ways in which we could bring more accountability and transparency to the ways in which we are doing policing. So it really puts together a score that looks at the amount of algorithmic or digital force that's being used in jurisdictions by law enforcement, and really looking at whether the amount of investment that's being put into the design and development of technologies to track and trace and sometimes terrorize communities was actually working for those communities, whether or not technology or the deployment of technology on the streets as a criminal justice intervention was more vanity projects as opposed to projects that were really enhancing quality of life and really lifting communities up. So that project is soon to be launched. I'm actually working on that project with two amazing data scientists from the School of Data Science, Claire and Sarah, and they've been there with me, and we've been really trying to tweak this tool and bring it out to the public in a few months. And I think law enforcement and the general public is pretty excited about it because so much is happening in technology. And I think we are all becoming more conscious and cognizant about the ways in which our data is being monetized and sometimes weaponized against us. So people like to know, what happens to my data when I go into a particular jurisdiction? Could that data eventually be used against me? Could I end up in a sort of an online sweep, what law enforcement looking for suspects? Could my data make me known to the police in real time? Could I become a suspect in a crime? So much is happening at the moment with our data and law enforcement. And this is just another way to rethink community policing, rethink the ways in which we police in general, and bring more accountability and transparency into the ways in which we're doing policing. And of course, bring some sort of public conversation or public engagement around questions of justice, equity, diversity and inclusion, and policing, and of course, surveillance technology. So that's the work that brought me there. And while I've been at the School of Data Science at UVA, getting involved in some very exciting projects there as well, and doing a lot of speaking and a lot of engaging and some mentoring to just ensure that we make AI ethics and data activism something that feels really natural and real to all of us, because when we think about data rights, we know that it is really turning into the civil rights movement of the now, of this generation.
Great, thank you for that. And there's lots that I think get people's wheels turning as I'll ask one more question and then I'm going to open it up in case people have initial questions here. But so in terms of data science specifically, what are some of the main ethical issues that you think data scientists should be concerned with nowadays?
I think some of the ethical issues that we're looking at would be questions of bias and discrimination in our data sets. How are we thinking about data? Are we bringing critical thinking to the data science space? Are we understanding context and history and experiences that inform the ways in which we collect and we analyze and we think about data. Also questions of building new and emerging technologies, using data, and whether or not we are paying sufficient attention to questions such as accountability and transparency and explainability, and of course, privacy and security. And what is our thinking around non-discrimination, or ensuring that we use data to build an inclusive and ethical technologies, and really bringing a broader perspective of why interdisciplinary thinking and multicultural approaches are so important to the ways in which we are thinking about using data to deploy technological solutions. And of course, looking at some of the long-term impacts of data and society. One of the projects that I am really paying a particular attention to is ways in which we are able, unfortunately, to transmit trauma through data in particular communities. And of course, when we think about that, I think my impetus for that is because I really want us to use data in ways that are much more creative and much more imaginative, where we can change legacies and really change the trajectories of lives that have been impacted really negatively by some of the societal forces that keep people down instead of really pulling them up.
I really like that line of transmitting trauma through data. That really makes me think. And I'm wondering if you're meaning specifically like by using old data, where we reinforcing patterns that have been there in the past, as opposed to, and I guess my next question would be then, I like the idea of being creative and imaginative. Like what could that look like on a practical level? Like if you have a bad data set, or what are some ways that we could fix that so that we could move forward with a better approach?
So what we're seeing, particularly in AI, while there are many tools that are being designed and deployed to detect and mitigate risks, we're realizing that a technological approach to risk management or a technological approach to thinking about bias and discrimination is insufficient. What we're also realizing is when you think of context and really bringing critical thinking to data, what that's asking you for to do a lot of personal work, do a lot of honest personal work, because if you are working in data science, you are supposed to have many dimensions of understanding and learning and perspective to bring that unique kind of consciousness to the work. So it's about our thinking, and it's about really broadening our own cosmologies and understanding that working in data science is a unique responsibility that requires so much of you. So it's not just a bad data set, or it's just so much more than that when it comes to thinking about the history of that data. And then that is what is so important, and putting that data in context and asking yourself, the data set that we're using, how does it fit along a framework, or fit within a framework of justice and equity and diversity and inclusion, and really what are some of the experiences surrounding the collection of this data. So it really brings to the fore questions of data sovereignty, data governance, and really thinking more about the historical context that really has colored in many ways the data sets that we continue to use.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to pause a little moment here. If anyone else has some questions, someone jump in. You can unmute yourself and ask a question directly, or you can put it into chat as well. I know it's always hard to be the first. There we are. We've got someone.
Thank you so much to CWIT and Renee. I'm already like writing lots of notes about all the things you're saying. I work in an organization here in Virginia that we are a computer science education support organization for K-12, really for all educators. And I'm really curious about what you might think are really the role of K-12 educators in helping students not only think about their digital citizenship and their safety on the internet, but also this piece of being able, in data analysis and to critically, as you say, analyze the data sets that they even produce. I mean, what would you say, I think, to teachers in how they can help youth really think about their data rights and really feel even invited into that conversation?
Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for that question. I think teachers have one of the most critical roles to play, because what we're seeing with data science at the moment is that data science requires interdisciplinary collaborations to really stretch its imagination. So just doing data science as a science is not delivering the kinds of unique solutions that are required to advance society. So what we need at that level of our teachers would be really engaging students of the collective responsibility that is required to design and develop and deploy ethical technology, and to bring the understanding that you can have ethics and innovation in the same space, and to let them also understand what is required for inclusive innovation is representation. Because data science is about measurement. Data science is about counting. It is about representation. It is about bringing all of us into that particular space where we're able to measure things accurately. If we exclude, then we are not accurate. If we don't ensure that all groups are visible, then we're not going to be accurate. And one of the challenges at the moment is that level of accuracy in data science, and who is being counted and who's not being counted. When we think about bias and discrimination, let's say in the credit and mortgage and finance industries, asking ourselves, who is coded to be credit worthy, or who is coded to be unworthy? And we really have to rethink those types of approaches. So I think at the level of that K-12 space, we need to have these conversations about diversity and equity and inclusion around data, because we're using data to transform. We're using data to build and deploy or roll out policies. And we just want to ensure what we are doing as we future-proof society is ensure that we are all co-designers of that future. So it's about collective responsibility. It's also about building the requisite levels of due diligence in our students. When we think about digital literacy, or we think about AI literacy, or we think about the democratization of data, and letting them understand what that vigilance requires. Concepts such as due process when it comes to artificial intelligence, or concepts such as duty of care, which are so which is so critical to the ways in which we are designing technologies. And just thinking about visibility and inclusion and representation, and that data science is just not about the numbers. It's much more than numbers. It's what we're going to really, it's about legacy, and I say it all the time. It's about creating these legacies. And if it is that you are going to be an architect, when it comes to legacy building as a data scientist, then you need that context. You need the emotional intelligence to go with the digital intelligence. So I think, Kristen, teachers have a very unique role to start these conversations and build that level of collective intelligence in our students who want to enter the digital space, or who want to enter the tech or data science space.
Great, thank you, Kristen and Renee, for that. Any other questions? Winston?
Hello there, my name is Winston. Thank you for talking with me,
Winston.
Renee. I'm with the UVA Library working on open access. And it seems to me that one effective way to root out bias, which you talked about in data sets, is to make them open them up to others. Do you have experiences or thoughts on how open and transparent data inform your work?
Thank you so very much. An excellent question. Of course, much conversation around open access. And I think open access is critical because I'm very passionate about community data and finding ways to engage communities around data and building that kind of community participation when it comes to the understanding that as communities, and I always say each and every one of us represent many communities at the same time. And it's about getting communities excited about accountability and transparency. And it's really about getting us excited about the fact that we are producers of knowledge, because most of us don't see ourselves as producers of knowledge, and that knowledge becoming the kind of intelligence that the public and private sector is using to build the many business models and systems that are impacting us as a society. So I'm very committed to that open access. Also, there are some challenges with that, because we all know that there are several, 4 or 5 or maybe 6 big tech companies, and many of them actually own the data. And one of the things that we're seeing right now would be even something like government really buying or paying or to access the data that's being collected by the private sector, because one of the biggest challenges in public space is the lack of data and the slowness in which data is collected, and the fact that census data only becomes relevant in about 5 years after it's collected. So when it becomes relevant, it becomes outdated pretty much at the same time. And then one of the things that we've been seeing in the public space is almost the demise of surveys. People aren't doing surveys anymore. We seem not to have the headspace to be participating in surveys and the census. So it's very important when we think about that open access space, but also some challenges, because even the data we need to make open belongs to the private sector. And that becomes another unique challenge. So just so much for us to think about in the public interest technology space, and then public information as well. So yeah, fantastic question, Winston, and nice to see a fellow UVA employee on.
Great, thank you. And I've seen a question here from, I think, Andrea in the chat, which says, I would like to hear what are some specific steps that students can take to do a critical due diligence, please. Okay,
fantastic. So when we're thinking about students, I think one of the things that we can do is data activism. So data activism really comes from that space of digital activism, and also comes from the space of understanding that we can use data to impact and affect any kind of change that's required, particularly political, social, environmental, and really encouraging our students, because many times students see data science and some of them may pull back thinking, well, this is so scientific, this may not be what I want to do. I want to do art, I want to do fashion, I want to do music and entertainment. But what we have seen is that every discipline has a critical role to play when we are thinking about building our future with data science. So what we've got to do is engage all our students and let them use the avenue of their own creativity to impact some kind of program or project using data. So if it is art as activism and activism as art, or music as activism and activism as music, bringing those collaborations together in a very creative way to include them in the critical space of data science. And then it's also about bringing those concepts such as bias and discrimination into the classroom space, or even the virtual classroom space, and let them start to understand how data is impacting them without them even knowing. Many times we pay attention to the privacy and the security aspects because we're dealing with, of course, young people, teenagers, children, and that's also very critical. But also encouraging them to think innovatively and imaginatively about how do we use data to transform our communities? How do we use data to transform society or to build the kind of society that we want? And then you've got to expose them to the importance of accountability and transparency and of course, explainability and fairness and ethics, which is so critical. Those are fundamentals around ethics and technology, and really inspire them in that space to think and to design and to work collaboratively to really, just think about ways in which they could effect change and the kind of impact that they can make. So it's, when I speak about due diligence, it's that understanding of the moral principles guiding ethical and inclusive and equitable technology, and building the level of collective intelligence that's required to do that, and building the kind of emotional intelligence as well that's required to enhance their digital intelligence. So it's just to get them excited about data, but getting them excited about data in ways in which they are already feeling competent, and ways in which they already have the capacity to deploy, their strong points and their capabilities. So not just making it, strictly about the numbers, but I always say it's about putting a little rhythm in the algorithms, right? So they could understand that, we can do this in other creative ways. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. We have another question in chat from Kristen. It says, it sounds like citizen education about public data is necessary. What vehicles are there to make this happen in a meaningful way?
So thanks again for that question. Yes, citizen action is real time and needs to happen, immediately. I think the challenge is this. We're all still trying to think about ways of engaging communities around concepts such as digital citizenship, concepts such as digital rights, concepts such as bias and discrimination when it comes to data science, or when it comes to building new and emerging technologies. Because it is so new, and because the conversation isn't so deeply entrenched, we've got to find ways, if we still sit, at the kitchen table. I know with the pandemic, we've been doing different kinds of things when it comes to just being together, but we've got to really start having these conversations more and more. I think because data is something that we use almost like air, like we breathe it, like we're not really paying attention to it. Most people are just not cognizant of the power of data, and questions such as data and democracy and decision making and exclusion. So what we've got to do is I always say, we as, we've got to just lead from wherever we are, because there really is no set format or no standard operating procedure type of framework that I can say, use this and this is going to deliver the results, because this is so new. This is so new, and even AI is even newer as a concept to so many people. But the main thing you've got to do is start the conversation, get the conversation flowing, and then really encourage people to start to think about their individual power, their individual responsibility, their collective power, and their collective responsibility, and find ways for us to really just mobilize around questions of the future. And what do you foresee your role to be in the future? And what is your data story? That's one that I always like to ask people. We usually ask people, what's your story, right? But the question right now is, what's your data story?
Well, that's great. Definitely thought-provoking there. More questions in the chat. Lots of them. So keep them coming. I will definitely go to each one. We have one from Stephanie here. She says, I've struggled with how to explain to family and friends not in the tech industry why it is important to be aware of their data privacy, and how their data is being used. Any tips on how to explain AI ethics to non-tech, non-data people?
Sure. So I would say what I always try to use is something that would sort of wake people up. So oftentimes when I ask people about, how do they feel about their data being monetized, or how do you feel about a company such as, whichever company we want to use, having all of these millionaires and billionaires, and they grew into those positions simply on what you liked, or what emoji you used, or how much time you spent on a particular topic, or what you shared, right? So when people start to think about the money around what they are producing, which would be their data, and when people start to think about the weaponization of their data, I think it's something that people wake up to. For me, I tell people, wherever you take your phone, to the bathroom, to the bedroom, you are just transmitting and creating and producing a raw material that's being used against you, and being used to build the fortunes of others. So it's about coming up with stories that people are going to be interested in, and people are always interested in their rights, in their pockets, right? In being harmed or being hurt. So it's really about just bringing those simple questions that impact us. And people want to be included. People don't want to be excluded. People want to know that if there's a future happening, that I could be involved in that. Or if someone is designing something for me, you know, I want to participate in that. You know, we all respect our rights, and we all understand what self-expression and self-actualization mean, and why these things are important. So I would say for non-technical, just speak about the monetization, speak about the weaponization, speak about the fact that an algorithm makes a decision about you and you're excluded. And the sad part is not only that you are excluded, is that you don't even know you were excluded. So those are the things that wake people up to thinking more and more about data and AI ethics, and particularly AI as we, and you know, I will always say that I'm very passionate about AI. It is so powerful. It has such extraordinary promise for every industry. It is so transformative. And when used diligently and used with the requisite levels of emotional intelligence, we can just do amazing things with this technology. What we don't want to do with this technology is replicate all of the things that are not good about the ways in which society has been moving forward and the ways in which we engage with each other. So people want to be a part of the future. With AI, sometimes there's a bit of fear because, you know, many of the images are being used in the media, create the fear, you know, the robot finger touching the human finger, the robot stepping out of, you know, the stratosphere, you know. And I think people need to know that they're already using AI. You know, if you're internet shopping, if you're using Netflix, if you're you know, accessing your healthcare information online, many of the things your things that you're just looking at, the things that you're searching for, and people are able to see that they're already participating in this future. But what is your level of participation? And that's what's critical. And who holds that power? And how do you retain some of that power? And how do you, you know, put yourself in a position to really, you know, ensure that you're a part of any narrative moving forward that speaks to the ways in which we're going to build, you know, a more sophisticated society.
Great, thank you. We have another question here from Jenna. Hopefully I will say everything correctly here. I'm thinking about the school to prison pipeline. The I don't know if that's how we pronounce it, VDOE says my district policy is not causal/problematic and stops there. However, the data shows disproportional discipline exists with regard to students of color and those with disabilities. How can we frame the data to force practical change?
All right, so let me read that question. I didn't, Melissa, could you just say it? Could you just?
Yes, it's Jenna Hines, it's that question there. And I think it's the Virginia Department of Education, it's the acronym.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah, sure. So the school to prison pipeline. So yes, so of course I'm a criminologist, so I've read all of those studies about ways in which punishment and discipline speaks in disproportionate ways to our students of color, particularly girls of color. And of course, I actually have a background. My first master's degree was actually working with students with disabilities and working in vocational rehab and working in education. So even my work as a criminologist, when we speak about therapeutic jurisprudence, that really speaks to the fact that the law must always play a very therapeutic role in the rehabilitation and of individuals and in the reentry of our returning citizens. So the school to prison pipeline, definitely something that we can use data science to stop, to avert, to change those trajectories, given my work with juveniles. And yes, the data is disproportionate when it comes to the discipline regarding students of color, of course, girls and more girls, and of course, young people with disabilities, because of how we analyze behavior when it comes to, or we analyze behavior when it comes to students of color and of course students with disabilities. So many of the idiosyncrasies and cultural differences create these this disproportionate approach. So this question is also about using data in ways that are culturally relevant. So when we speak about the context around data, is understanding that that data needs to be culturally relevant, culturally sensitive, and of course, culturally appropriate. And that's the challenge what we see with a discipline of students of color. That whole interpretation of what is a student being rude or student being disruptive or student not being, not participating, or how we analyze the body language or facial expression of students of color or students with disabilities, and maybe the lack of that understanding in the classroom space when it comes to questions such as juvenile delinquency and understanding behavior and understanding how conduct disorders or the kinds of challenges that we see that represent themselves as delinquency may be trauma, maybe early exposure to violence, maybe you didn't have a full meal at home today, so you're not unable to focus. So it's really about bringing the context. And many times when we collect data, or many times when we're using data, we don't have the contextual background to understand or to really bring a more sharpened sense of sophistication to the analysis of that. So that's why we create that school to prison pipeline. And there are definitely ways in which we could use data imaginatively to rethink that school to prison pipeline and bring that kind of culturally relative context to the data sets and design the kinds of solutions that are required to provide wraparound services and multi-systemic family therapy and the kinds of things that work for our students, and not bringing a stereotypic understanding of good behavior or what good behavior looks like in the classroom space.
Great, thank you. The next question down there is from Michelle, who asks, your suggestions for students building interdisciplinary excitement, emotional and collective intelligence, I think would require opportunities as part of classroom instruction. I want to do this, and at the same time, oftentimes educators, parentheses me, are bound to a standard curriculum, both in K-12 and higher ed. To what extent do you think the standard curriculum needs to be tossed in favor of collective action?
I must say, you guys are a tough crowd. There's a lot of questions. Let's not toss anything just yet. I think what we need to do is really create that sort of collective intelligence in the curriculum itself, in the sense that so much of what we want to create does not have to come from the structured curriculum, but could come from the creative ways in which we engage students around the curriculum. So a lot of that work could be work that the students do collaboratively and they create among themselves. So it could be in their projects. It could be ways in which we create a group dynamic among students to create those types of projects, because when we go to challenge the standard curriculum, that can take forever to get change in a curriculum. It's just a lot of things that need to be done on a lot of levels. But I think the best way to build the kind of excitement and emotional and collective intelligence is the ways in which we bring more imagination to the things that we ask students to do, the ways in which we ask them to do their projects, how we engage them with technology as well. Of course, using technology in there, using AI, using virtual reality, asking our, because those are the things students are using right now. So finding ways in which we could include the technology that they are so engaged in at the moment to create or to deliver the scholarly work that's required of them as well. So how do we use TikTok and Instagram in a scholarly way to sort of deploy the kinds of projects or do the kind of work in the classroom. And I think it's just about exciting them, you know, just about exciting them. As we have seen Shakespeare done in hip hop, right? We can do things to really excite them, because trying to change a curriculum, that gets into so much politics that you're going to be exhausted, you know, before the end of the day.
Thank you for that. There's definitely some comments here, some thank yous for previous things you said. I think in relation to when you mentioned, what is your data story? Kristen posted, and who owns your data story? Which is another good question there. I think, yes, I think Kristen also said the narrative is mostly about how giving access to our data helps us live better, enjoy more convenience, have things delivered to us. It's very tempting to say yes. And then another comment from Kristen, Virginia has computer science SOLs for K-12. Computer science integration, including data science exploration, is now required, if not being applied in every school decision. So it sounds like there is space in the curriculum now to engage in these questions. Oh, no, Kristen, we're really appreciative. No apologies. Are there any other questions at this point? I can go back to my list while you think of some more. I was thinking on the practical level, if you want to engage in these things and you're in a data science related job, but perhaps no one else is asking these questions, or there's resistance and you just don't want to be that person all the time, what would you say to someone like that? How could you encourage them to continue to bring these questions up and feel like there's a space for that, even if they feel some sort of pushback?
Right. So a lot of the work that I do would be in the private sector, and really working with organizations to build an ethical culture around new and emerging technologies. And I speak a lot, and I actually lecture a lot on how do we communicate effectively about the ethical risks in new and emerging technologies. And one of the things that I have seen for my many years as a crisis communicator and working in risk management is that when many private organizations do not want to pay attention to a rights-based approach to AI ethics or even data ethics, they do pay attention to a risk-based approach. And when you start to talk about reputational risk and financial risk, and thinking about ways in which the organization could become the center of a media expose, and if you do something or you deploy something that really impacts a particular community in a negative way, how is that going to hit your bottom line? What is that going to do for the long-term reputation? What's that going to do for the products that we are producing? Companies start to wake up to it on that risk base. I mean, we want everyone to come from a place where they understand, listen, their basic rights people are deserving of when it comes to using technology. But when you speak about reputation, when you speak about the impact on finance, when you speak about investigations, when you speak about the lack of compliance and regulators, when you speak about disciplinary action, and when you speak about the fact that, you know, you can just be dragged across social media and the organization is going to really feel the impact of that in a long term, and reputation rehabilitation is not something that happens overnight. Organizations start to wake up to the fact that we need to do better. And I think even from an HR perspective, I think HR, as HR tries to build, you know, that level of talent and intellectual capital in the organization, they've got to be coming from a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective, thinking about technology and thinking about data science and thinking about AI, because you want to have that level of inclusion. And it all, you know, we always hear about who's at the table and who's being part of the decision-making of the organization. And it's about really just waking up the C-suite to the fact that you have a responsibility, and this is the responsibility moving forward. But if you go from that risk-based perspective in the private sector, then they always want to know, okay, how is this going to impact us? Beyond the fact that, you know, could we do this, and could legal back us on this, or legal says this is okay, because there's a whole space between, of course, what is legal and what is moral. And I think social media pressure and that sort of reputational pressure after you create a crisis around some sort of project or program or system that you've created or deployed, then you start to understand why you need to have an ethical culture around the development and deployment of technology, and why you need to communicate effectively to your audiences or the many publics that access whatever you're creating about the technology, and about questions such as accountability, transparency, and of course, privacy and security, and of course, just not creating things that are discriminatory as we think about concepts such as equity and inclusion, and of course, diversity.
Thank you for that. And I guess as a follow-on question, if you feel like you want to know more, I know your bio mentions that you are part of the creation of this ethical emerging technologist certification, but for someone who wants more training, is that the way to go, or what else would you recommend for, yeah,
well, the first thing I'm going to recommend is UVA, because I need to do that, right? Because that's where I am. So I recommend UVA as the place that you could go to learn more about ethical technology and about ethical data science, and about you know, just doing technology in an inclusive and diverse and justice-oriented way. And of course, Melissa, as a sterling example of what that graduate program produces, could speak more to that. So UVA is a great place to really enhance that knowledge. Also, if you want a little more of me, I lecture many courses on Coursera. If you're looking for a certificate and just don't have the time right now to think about a complete master's. But of course, and as well as just Googling it, there's so many frameworks that are out there. There's so much knowledge now in the space. There's a very robust community of AI ethicists and data activists and data ethicists who are speaking about these challenges and speaking about doing technology in a way that is going to make us the kind of society that we really want to be. And just even this conversation we're having here, just having more individuals coming to have this conversation, and also thinking about or rethinking what is considered expertise in the field, because you can bring community knowledge into this space as well. Because as I say, there's so much knowledge coming from the community level, and coming from activist groups, and coming from community groups that are thinking about public interest technology, and thinking about ways in which we could use data science and artificial intelligence to really enhance public policy and really build communities that are going to be sustainable. So it's a really dynamic time to source information and to source and to build conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just looking in the chat, I just see that there's some links that people have posted toward SOLs and some of the data science standards for Virginia. So please feel free to check those out. And then we had a thank you from Jenna for reminding her how to use real justice/injustice stories to make impacts clear. So yeah, thank you for that. So at this time, I'm going to just pause again if anyone has any other questions. And if you, I probably won't see your hand if you raise it, so feel free to just unmute and ask, or just put it in the chat.
This is more of a comment.
Oh.
I'm just curious about, sorry, I'm curious about things like coded bias and other, I can't remember the name of another popular Netflix kind of series where people really seem to have their interest piqued. Do you think there's anything else out there like that to recommend that people watch? There's sort of a short list of some things that I think can really open eyes.
Definitely. Coded Bias, really exceptional work, featuring the research of Joy Buolamwini and Deborah Raji, and of course, Sophia Noble and Kathy O'Neill, some of the very brilliant scholarship and the amazing women who have been really driving data ethics, and who are bringing the kind of light that needs to really ventilate the issues that we're seeing when it comes to bias and discrimination. I know recently there was also a documentary on Facebook and the psychological impact on things like, the psychological impact of platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. There's been some research out there on the psychology of Instagram, particularly on young girls, teenage girls, very important work as well. There's also just some great books out there as well when it comes to thinking more critically about bias and discrimination in the digital space. And there's so many panels now because of how we've been existing for the last 2 years. So many public discussions when it comes to bias and discrimination and building inclusive and diverse technology. There's just a plethora of research information out there as well. And I could also send you a list of books I could email to Melissa to share. That would be a great resource when it comes to thinking about ethical technology, or using technology in a very ethical way, or just thinking about bias and discrimination.
Great, thanks. And there was a question in the chat from Christina who said, could you tell us more about the UVA program?
Okay, so I could tell you this much. I spent maybe 2 semesters lecturing big data ethics, and it was a really rewarding experience for myself. What I loved about the program would be that most of the participants in the master's program online, the one that I was involved with, were practicing professionals. So it really was real-time knowledge to practice, that things that you can take back into your workspace immediately. The program itself is really a top-notch when you think about the kind of technological expertise that you're going to build. I think given the commitment of the School of Data Science to diversity, equity, inclusion, and of course, justice, you're also getting that interdisciplinary and collaborative kind of intelligence that's required. I think there's a really vibrant and committed core of professionals and who are faculty who really understand what is needed in the data science space. I think the school is new, which makes it even more exciting, and it's really alive when it comes to the kind of thinking around the things that the school wants to do, and it is really a great space to advance your career, given the kind of participants who you're going to meet in the classroom space, as well as the kind of mentoring that you're going to get. I also presented my own project as the data activist in residence as a capstone, and that's where I found Claire and Sarah, who are now graduates of that program, who continue to work with me to build my own tool. And I kid you not, it's exceptional. I love the fact that we're 3 women working on this law enforcement project together. It's really a great space, I think, to learn. And most of you may know more about UVA than I do, because I'm just a recent implant around Charlottesville, but it's been a good experience so far, and I think you're not going to be disappointed. And as I said, Melissa may be able to speak more to the the program, because she is a graduate of it. But I think it's exceptional. Not that I think, I know it's exceptional.
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, I would just add, I did the residential program, which is about a year long. Definitely quite intense, but definitely worthwhile. It was great, just a good breadth of all the technologies that are out there and current in data science space. And so learned a lot. And I love the ethics side of things. I got a lot out of that course, especially. And just the kind of questions that people would ask, and we get to write papers. So if you like that side of things, it's quite enjoyable as well. But yeah, if anyone wants to reach out to talk to me about my experiences, I'd be more than happy to do that. Just some comments here with Kim put the Algorithmic Justice League link there if anyone's interested. Andrea says she'd like to have access to the book list, so I'll follow up with you, Renee, afterwards. She shared her email. And then Professor Casey Feisler put some great tech and data ethics resources on TikTok, and there's a list of book recommendations. So thank you for that, Maritza. Are there any other questions? Music takes two. Okay, this is Kristen just reaching out. If anyone wants to contact her, you can. So I'll take it and ask my, well, actually, yeah, the one question I've been holding on to, and I think it'd be great to kind of end us off with, but sometimes when we have these kinds of discussions about AI and the way it's been weaponized or the way things have gone awry, people can get very jaded. But you don't come across as jaded at all. You seem very optimistic and like you see a lot of good points. So can you tell us more about what keeps you so optimistic about this technology and yeah, what motivates you there?
Sure. So I think what keeps me smiling about AI is the potential and the promise and what we can use data to do and the kinds of systems that we can build with data, and particularly artificial intelligence. It is powerful, it is pervasive, and it offers extraordinary promise to just about every industry. It's transforming the ways in which we engage with each other, the ways that we're thinking about the world, and are really encouraging an extraordinary amount of imagination with the things that we can do. When we think about virtual reality or the work that I want to do in virtual reality as well, or we think about precision healthcare, or we think about education, or using it for rehabilitation, or using it among our prison population, or just about communication and entertainment. It's really exciting because it makes the world more connected, as well as it brings a unique kind of sophistication and savvy to our systems. I'm also excited because there's work to be done to ensure that we're all included, to ensure that we are all visible, to ensure our underrepresented and unrepresented and high needs and underserved and vulnerable populations have a voice. And one of the things that I said at the beginning of this conversation is my commitment to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which we call the GA-CCRi principle. And I've been speaking so long about AI and data activism. I'm often referred to the Jedi Queen of AI because I'm always there promoting justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is an exciting time. It's an exciting technology. We all have got to get involved in it because we have an opportunity to change legacies. And I'm so passionate about legacies because I've worked in the criminal justice system and I've seen how being involved, justice involved, or involved in the criminal justice system could really change the trajectory of a life in real time. And it's often hard to pull those lives back. And this is why I'm so committed to ensuring that we do not continue to transmit intergenerational trauma with data. And we use data in ways in which we are building communities up, we are changing legacies, and we are ensuring that we include as many as we can, all of us, in building a productive and sustainable future that really speaks to the best of us as human beings, as opposed to the things about us that are just not the things that we want to use technology to replicate.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for this conversation today. Thank you for everyone who came to participate. And it's just wonderful. Like, we're all here, we're all having this conversation, and we can take these ideas with us wherever we go today and every day. So yeah, I really appreciate all of your time. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.